Boker Tov, today's daf is daf Yud Tes in קידושין, as we learned for Shlomo for Los Ben Ruben and Yosef Israel Ben Chaim Michal. We're at the sixth line on daf Yud Tes Manala. And we've learned that if a man buys an Adam, buys a young Jewish girl from her father, and he can do that up until the age of 12, the father can only sell her till the age of 12. At that point, she goes out free no matter what, whether she served 6 years, whether the yovel has passed, whether she didn't buy herself out. But she goes out with what we call Simon. She goes out at the age of 12. Now, the Adam can use that same money that he bought her with, as long as there's some money left, as we'll see. There's some money left. That's according to everybody. If there is some money left, meaning she hadn't worked out the whole 6 years. She worked out, let's say, 5 years and almost 6 years, but there's still 1 day left. There's still some value left in the work that she owes to the Adam. The Adam can marry her then with that same, whatever money is left, or his son can marry her. That's the law in the Torah. In other words, without any additional transaction taking place, the Adam just says, marry me with the money that I gave your father initially, or whatever was left of that money. He can do that. So, can the Adam marry off his young son, his underage bar mitzvah? Normally, we know that a man who's not bar mitzvah, he cannot perform marriage. He's not a gadol. If a 10-year-old boy goes over to a girl and says, even if she's a bas mitzvah, it's meaningless. So, but over here, it's different, because here the father is empowered to do this קידושין, and he did it already. Maybe there's power to make his son, his young son, married to this woman. Can he do that? Beno, says, Beno, Pasuk says, Beno, his son. Beno Kodu, it's his son, any son. Bar didn't specify bar mitzvah. Odilma Beno Domine, he's got to be like, the son has to be like the father. Mahu Gadol, just like the father's a Gadol. Beno Gadol, got to be a Gadol, otherwise it doesn't work. Rav Zera. So Rav Zera is going to prove from Tashma. Pasuk says that if a man commits adultery with a woman, they're going to be killed. So it says over there, Ish prat lekatan, only for man. If a katan does it, he's not responsible. And although it's a terrible sin, he's not chayiv misa for that. Prat lekatan. Asher yin af es eshes re'er, if he commits adultery with the wife of another man, asher as eshes ish. I misquoted. Ish asher yin af es eshes ish. If a man, that means a bar mitzvah, who commits adultery with the wife of a man, prat eshes katan, excluding the wife of a katan. If you commit miyayid, came a sinuish katan. How do you say that pasuk says if you commit adultery with the wife of a man? Now that excludes a katan. If you say that a katan, a young child, can be married to the Amma Ivriya through his father's conducting it by making yiyud for the son. Why do you say that you can't have a wife of a katan? You could have a wife of a katan if the father can marry off his young son to this Amavriya that the father had bought from another Jewish man. You could have a wife. You could have a wife of a young man, of an underage boy. So why do you have to? So therefore, the fact that the pasuk says there is no prat leishes katan. The fact that it said that excludes that mashma, that you can't have the wife of a katan, meaning he can't be married. So the Gemara says, no, just the opposite. The elamai enamiyayid. If he can't make yiyud, because there is no such thing as a young boy getting married to a woman, even if it was through his father's, for his father's instituting it by the yiyud, amai kamar like what does the pasuk have to exclude it for? Right? Tifshit mina demiyayid. Just the opposite. Why would the pasuk say if a man commits adultery with the wife of a man, then it's adultery? But if it's the wife of a katan, then it's not considered. It's not as bad. What do you mean the wife of katan? There is no such thing. You don't have to exclude. There is no such thing. The wife of katan. The fact that he says only with the wife of an adult man, excluding the wife of a katan, indicates that there is a yud. There is a yud that a father can marry off his young son to this amavriya. However, if they commit, if the wife then commits adultery, it's excluded. Only ish ish, not the wife of a katan. How could you have a katan? There is no such thing. No, there is. If the father marries off by a yiyud, but the pasuk excludes it from punishment. Again, he says, first we assume that it means Prat Leish's cotton, that there is also Yemet Mi'ayin, and Kematzinah cotton. We do have Leish's cotton. How can you say Prat Leish's cotton? Just the opposite. Belamai Ain't Mi'ayin. What do you say, that he can't be Mi'ayin, his young son? Amai Yid makes designating the son in place of him to marry the Yom Avriya. So Michael Malik, what does the pasuk exclude for? The pasuk exclude, if there's no such thing, there is no such thing as a young boy getting married. So what does pasuk exclude? Oh, if you commit adultery with the wife of a young man, there is no such thing as a wife of a young man. A young man can't have a wife. Why did the pasuk exclude it? Oh, Rashi, no. There's no proof from that at all. When the pasuk says that if a man commits adultery with the wife of a man, what does it exclude? Not the case of Yid. We're talking about a Yavam. Reuben died with no children, left a brother Shimon. Shimon was only 9 or 10 years old. And we've said that since there's already a Zika there, as long as the boy can perform Yibum, can have Bia, they're married, even though he's not Bar Mitzvah. That's what we're talking about, a case of Yud. That's not the case of Bar Mitzvah. We can't prove anything from this pasuk to the issue of can he marry off your young son to the Yom Avri or not. Here we're talking about a Yavam who's 9 years old and his Bia is a Bia. The Midaraisa, she's fit for him because he can't make marriage on his own. He can't go over to a girl if he's 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 and say, and that's a marriage. No, it's not a marriage at all. But since there's already a Zika, Minat Torah, all he has to do is have Bia. That's it. He only has to consummate it with Bia, and that he's capable of doing if he's 9 years old. So Mao is saying, I might think keep the Meraisa Chazal since Midaraisa, she's fit for him, and therefore she is his wife. If he performs Yibum, he would inherit her, and he would be Matami for her if he's a Kohen, etc. All the rules of marriage apply. The Midaraisa Chazal and Bia is Bia. So Habar Lev so I might think now if somebody sleeps with her, if an adulterer comes and sleeps with this woman, she's married to this 9-year-old boy. I might think Chayvesh Kamash Malan, then okay, he's excluded from that pasuk. Why? Technically, she is married to the guy. Minator, she's married. And it would be considered adultery. But the pasuk says, Isha Shayif Ashes Ish, the wife of a man. He's not a man, therefore you're potter from Misa in that case. What about our question? We start off the Gemara by saying, Rish Lakish asks this question: can a man may designate his young son, designate Yom Avriya for his young son or not? Tashma Amrav Eivu Amrav Ein Yid El Begadol. Number one, Yid is only by an adult boy, and Yid only Das is only with his knowledge. Gemara says, Tarti, aren't you really saying the same thing? You're saying the same thing. Gadol is a person who has knowledge. That's how Rashi learns the kasha. You're not two things, or it's really the same thing. You only have Yid if he's a bar das, if he knows what he's doing, meaning he's bar mitzvah, he's a gadol. Isn't it one and the same? Tosas learns a little bit differently. You need a gadol's mashma, even if it wasn't with his das, if it was against his will, or he was asleep, or something like that, or he didn't know what was going on. And das indicates, right, that no, you have to have his das. So which one is it? Tati Klom the Sasana says, right, it says Tosas. The Reisham Rein Yid El Begadol Mashma Afiu Shlomi Das. Mani Bahadar Rein Yid El Midas Mashma Afiu Shlomi Afiu Shlomi Das Lomani. So does it das? But the way Rashi is Pashut is you're saying the same thing. You said Ein Yid El Begadol, Ein Yid El Midas. Isn't that one and the same thing? You need Gadol who has das. Tarti, there's no matam conference. Well, it is one thing, but he's giving the reason. Matam in Yellow Gadol. Why is he only with a Gadol? In other words, you cannot designate your young son for the Amavriya. Why? The Fishain Yid of Das gets to be with Das. So that's one answer. That the two things are really one. Yid is only with a Gadol. Why? Because then he Das. Iboy Seima. Now we come to an interesting different effect of this Yid, or an outcome is it. Iboy Seima. My midas her das. Now understand something. How old is this girl when Yid is being performed? She's under 12. Yet, and she's not a bardas, right? Now, when it comes to Yibum, we said, okay, you don't need das over there. All you need is, consummate the marriage with Bia. Anybody else, we always have an understanding. Cherushot of a cotton. What's a cotton is like a cotton under bar mitzvah. They have no das. Okay, when it comes to the Dharam, we say that, in the year before, they are considered an Adarim or an Adarim, right? There's a special case there. But over here, he says, Midas, her das. He says, you know what it means? Yeah, when he said, Ein Yid El Begadol, you have to have an adult boy, adult male. He cannot marry off his underage under bar mitzvah age boy to this Amavriya. And then you'll be das does not mean his das, not because he needed das of the God. God means obviously it's das. The das over here means he needs her consent, which is a very strange thing because we always understand that under if she's not bar mitzvah, her consent means nothing. She doesn't know what's going on. Special case over here. He says, das, my das masda. Why is that? Why? The Tani Abaya braid, Ravavu, Abaya, the son of Ravu learned like this. The Pasuk says, Asher lo yadav. It says what in that Pasuk? If imra'ah be'ena, right? If it is bad if she's bad in his eyes. Now, what does that mean? And the Asher lo yadav, which he did not, therefore he did not designate her, did not marry her. V'hafta, and then he must to allow her to be redeemed. And then it says, he can't sell her to somebody else. The Adam has several choices. He paid for this girl, right? She's going to work for him either until she's bat mitzvah, until 6 years happens, till Yovel, or until she buys herself back. He should marry her. That's the proper thing, to marry her and bring her into his harem, whatever you want to call it, bring her into his house and treat her like a proper wife, a Jewish wife. Okay, but it says is if he didn't like her or she didn't do good by him, let's say, then how so that he didn't marry her? Okay, then let her redeem herself. The pasuk goes on, different ways to understand that. Okay, but here we understand this: if he didn't like her, she didn't do good by him, and he didn't marry her. What's shot in that? Abaya learned this price, the Tani Abaya, he learned this price. It says, who Tani Lahir the price warmer? He explained it. The קידושין, right? What does that mean? He didn't make קידושין according to Rav Shapiro, the Amar Mos Rishon Slav קידושין knew. The Pashup Shem Rav Shapiro, we mentioned him yesterday, we're going to have it now. Rav Shapiro says that the first money that he gave, listen carefully, when the first money, what happened? The Adam bought, let's say the Adam paid 600 shekels, let's say, for this girl, right? To work for him for 6 years, or until Yobril, until she buys herself out, or until she has some money. So it says that first money was not for קידושין. The money was not for קידושין, and therefore, in other words, that was for buying her, that was for her services, but not for קידושין. So therefore, now, if he marries her, what is he marrying her with? With the money she owes him still some servitude, right? She's still within the 6 years, even if it's the last day. That's what he's giving her now. He's saying, you know what? The last day you worked with me, one day there's a pruta work of work left that you have owe me. I'm giving you that pruta, and you're marrying me now. That means with her consent. It's not that the father married her off. She's marrying off herself. Now, obviously, she's only a ktana. So what's her consent? It's the understanding when the father sold her with the understanding that he's allowing her to get married to this guy, but it has to be with her consent. It wasn't for קידושין, and Rashi explains. Rashi halfway down, right? Abai explained it. High time and high tzarch liyada. Rabbi Yosef would do the Amar Mos Rishon Shekibel Lav. That's something קידושין. The Ein Yid El Maput Shaleh. He's only miyater with whatever work she still owes him. She owes him, let's say, a prutas worth of work. Ain't leficha ain't das of, but the father's wasn't involved in it from the beginning. But ain't modiash the kabbalah and קידושין. In other words, it wasn't the father marrying her off. The father sold her. There's two ways to look at it. The father sold her, and possibly the guy's going to marry her with that. So when he took the money for קידושין, for servitude, it was also when the father received the money for her servitude. It was also the money for קידושין. Or he's saying, no, that money was for servitude alone. If the Adam wants to marry her, he has to marry her with whatever is left of her, whatever work she still owes him to complete the 6 years, and then she agrees to it, even though she's a ktana. So there's some power here that the father did give, because she's still a ktana. As it were, we had this yesterday at the top of this page. His interpretation of Rav Shapiro is as follows: even if you say that the first money that the father received in servitude was also the money for קידושין, The Adam gave him money. He says, listen, here's the money for her service. If I like to marry her, that'll be the money for the marriage too. But why do you need her consent? The Talmud calls it this designation. A yiyud in Hebrew is what is your ultimate purpose, right? You designated her, right? What is the purpose of this? What does yada mean? Says Rashi, and that shiny acha dechsiv lashon yada lemedusha lashon deya. Yud, he's translating as lashon deya. It's got to be with her. Understand? Even though the strange thing over here is that she's not bas mitzvah, but it's got to be with her consent anyway. She has to have her consent. And Rashi, the previous Rashi is an important Rashi too, because this Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, even though Rav Yosef Yehuda says, if there's money left, what did Rav Yosef Yehuda say? He says, we're going to see Rav Yosef in a minute. The Tanya, we're going to explain what he says. But here Rashi points out before, even if you say, according to Rav Yosef Yehuda, that the original money that the father gave was for Kiddushin, what's the nafkamina? If not the father received. The father received money for Kiddushin. The question is, did the father marry her off or not? If you say the father married her off, in other words, when he took the money for her servitude that was also for Kiddushin, then if he married her off, what would be an afkamina? That if, let's say, the Adam married her, and now she became an almana, he wouldn't be able to sell her again, even though she's under 12. Why? Because we saw Rabbi Akiva holds, and the same thing with Reb Shimon, that ein shifchas acher ishas. And we saw yesterday, once he marries her, right, Akiva Shapir's big dova, if once he married her off, whether a regular marriage, married her off to some guy, or he sold her in servitude with an understanding of marriage coming afterwards, wouldn't be able to sell her again. But if she married herself off, meaning the original money that the father received, that was for servitude. Now she has to work for him for 6 years. That's her job. If there's some money left at the end, so he can marry her with that money, meaning not money, but the money that she owes him, he can marry with that money. So that's the two ways to learn Rav Yosef Yehuda. What do Rav Yosef actually say? Here we are at the wide lines in the Gemara. The Tanya, or right before the white lines. The Tanya, where's the Brisa? Yeah, the pasuk says, "Imra b'nei Adonai asher lo yadav v'hafta yadav tzarich she'shos b'yam k'dei piyah." In order for him to marry her, there has to be some time left in her servitude, even the last day, enough to be poted. It's got to be at least a pruta there. And with that, he's marrying her. Mikan Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda in the first line of the Gemara. If there's enough time. On the last day of her work, it could be in the 4th year or 5th year also for sure. But even if there's enough, even if it's on the last day of her servitude, there's enough left. She still owes him a pruta worth of work. He's marrying her with that mikudeshes. If there's nothing left, it's like right before Shkia. She's worked off the whole 600 shekels. There's nothing left. There's not even a half a pruta worth that she owes him. He's not marrying her. He's not giving her anything now. He can't marry her with that. The original money was not for Kiddushin. Listen carefully, if the original money that the father received from the Adam was for Kiddushin, so she's married with that even if the money's gone, right? Even the money's gone. A man says, a guy goes over, I'd like to marry your daughter. Here's, I'm going to give you $100, right? And I want the marriage to be chal in 6 months. Okay, in 6 months, a marriage. The money's gone. The money's gone. He took the money. I'm marrying her. The money's gone. So the same thing. If the father sold her, and that was also the case of Kiddushin, so even if the money's gone, we don't care. Like Rashi says in the last line of the page in Rashi, there's Kivan Damratam says, marry me here. I'm giving you this money for servitude, and I'll marry you also with this money. It could be a year, from the time that he bought her, it's considered a year. I'm marrying me or serving with money. Could argue and say there are cases where you say marry me after 30 days with this money, the money's gone. Maybe it wouldn't work then. That's not such a good example. But he said over here, marry me. Here's the money. This money will be for servitude, and I may also want to use it for marriage from right now, even though he actually said. Who? She? Yeah. Oh, she wouldn't be able to. She wouldn't be able to. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this. Exactly the question of the Mark. On the day we're going to discuss that in detail. So, Rav Yosef Yehuda said what it says. You have to have enough money left. That means that she's only marrying her at that. He's only marrying her at that point, even on the last day of work with the last pruta. And so he's marrying her with her consent based on the pasuk Ye'ada. You have to have das there. Turns right like Ye'ada is turn the dollar before the ayin. That's like it should have day. He has to have her understanding, right? And if there's no money left, not the first money was not for Kedusha. The first money was for servitude. Now, if she still owes him something, he's marrying her up. Nachma Yitzchak interprets Rabbi Yosef differently. Even if you say the first money was for Kedushin, still you need her das. The Pasuk says, you know what? Even though technically the first money was for Kedushin, but if the Pasuk says B'hafte, you have to have the ability, when you marry her, you have to have enough money to be quoted there, a special Pasuk. So therefore, there's two ways to understand Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef says, if there's money left, you can marry. If there's no money left, then you can't marry her anyway. Even if the original money was for marriage as well as servitude, but if there's no money left, the Pasuk says it doesn't work. There's got to be some money left when he actually performs a year. So we have this idea over here, and that's why. So what do we come out with? That a man cannot marry off his young son with Yud, right? Because it says, she's right. He says it's got to be a gadol. That's it. You can't. That doesn't work, and it's got to be das. And it could very well be that the other answer is Hema is that no, it's got to be her das, and it goes like Rabbi Yosef Yehuda. Right, it goes according to Rav Shapiro, who says that there must be money left over there then, and therefore it's with her consent. That's the idea of midas, that it's got to be her consent. Why does it need her consent? If you say that the father originally, when he sold her, he also married her off, then doesn't need her consent. Father can marry off his daughter when she's 1 day old, when she's 6 years old, whatever. Doesn't need her consent normally. But over here we're saying you need her consent, either because he's only marrying her then, the father's out of the picture, the father's not considered to have married her off over here, he sold her and that's it. And then the Torah says the husband, the Adon can marry her, but the father's out of the picture. According to the first chapter in Rav Yosef, the second chapter, Nachman Yitzchak's interpretation of Rav Yosef is no, the father did marry her off. Except there's a special passage that when the man actually performs the marriage and consummates the marriage, there must be some money left in the kid either. Amrav Nachman. Listen carefully. A man can tell his young girl, his young daughter, underage, see, we can go accept your Kiddushin, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda. Like Rabbi Yosef Yehuda's pshat. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says, what, there must be money left. Didn't Rabbi Yosef Yehuda say, the first money wasn't for Kiddushin. The first money that the father received for his servitude was for work. But the Chimishayir Bashava put there was somebody left over there. He sold it with that understanding, but he didn't really do it. So Hachanami Loshna here also. The father told her, go accept this money. Even though the father didn't accept the money. Normally when we say a man can marry off his young daughter, the father accepts the money. He can marry off until the age of 12 and a half. He's entitled to the money. But over here, where the father said, go, you accept the money. You go keep the money for yourself. Go, you go do this. It's a marriage. Why? Because just like Rav Shapiro says that a man, the first money that he served was for servitude. And now when the Adon is marrying her, he's marrying her with her consent, with the money that's left over there. The father's out of the picture. Here too, the father could say, okay, you can go accept your money with his permission. You can do that. Rashi explains that I'm at base, the top line of a base. I'm a whole machar v'yodea. Since he sold her and he knows that the Adam could marry her if you it's considered with his knowledge. It's the same thing as if he says, go accept your Kiddushin. And so if a man tells his young daughter, 6-year-old girl, go take money from that guy and you'll be married to him, that works. But it's considered with his consent. The same way, like Rav Shapiro says, if there's money left over at the end, selling you in servitude, there's money left over at the end and you're going to marry her, that's fine, that's my consent too. Normally said Mekadosh Milva, we had that back and up of doesn't work. Why? Because Milva saw if a man lends Reuben lends Rachel $100. A day later he says, listen, that $100 I gave you, that'll be your ring, that's your wedding. It doesn't work. Why? Because that $100 is gone. That's Lotzon. That's not the same money. He's good. When you borrow money, you're not going to pay back with the same bills. You're going to pay back with different money. Milva's Lotzon. It's not considered a deposit. But if there's a mashkan over here, mashkan is different. Again, now 3 lines from the bottom of if there's collateral there, mekudeshes. Why? Because then they put up a mashkan. There's something there. But Rabbi Yosef didn't Rabbi Yosef say most of Rishon Slav Kedushin. The first money was not. The first one was for servitude, not for Kedushin. Now you're marrying off whatever's left. So what is left there? It's a loan. What is a loan? She owes him the work. She owes him the work, which is the value of the money. What's the mashkin? Herself. her body is the mashkon, and he's got her under his control. Even though if there's some work left in her before the 6 years up and behind, and makes it's a קידושין. So here also, in other words, since Rabbi Shapiro says that she's a mashkon, and the work that she owes him is like a loan. She owes him loan. He paid for 6 years of servitude. She owes him a few more days or a few more hours left of work. He's marrying her with that. Why does that work? It's a loan. The answer is because she herself is a mashkon, and therefore this kind of a marriage does work.
So does she have to work?
She has to work, of course. You force her to work. Tan Rabbana. Kate said,
no. Now it's hers.
When? Oh, after he makes yud. No, after he makes yud, then she's fully married.
She has to work anyway if she's married.
No, she doesn't have to. Tan Rabbana. Kate said, now we're going to explain that. He tells him in front of two witnesses, right? Mary, you are designating any of these lashonos. Even at the end of the 6 years, as long as there's a few minutes left, even right before Shkia Zechama, it's on the last day of her servitude, right before Shkia. As long as I'm like, now he has to treat her like a wife. You can't treat her like a shifcha anymore. You can't boss her around. She's a woman. See over here, there's a difference between the way you treat a slave girl versus the way you treat your wife. For people who think that it's one and the same, the Gemara is being very clear. You have to treat her like a wife, not like a slave girl. Yes, if you don't marry. So he doesn't say anything here. The Tanakhama doesn't say anything about money left over, because effectively he married her when he took her in servitude. In other words, when he bought her in servitude, initially at the beginning, when he bought her from the father, it was with an understanding, right? Even though I might marry you, so it's liyil mafreya. Even if there's no money right now, the money was there initially. It's like he married her from the beginning, right? It's like he says ki'ilu, right? As Rashi said before, the lekah shows nami kivan according to Tanakama, right? Or the way Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak understood Reb Yosef Reb Yehuda was a lot of kedushin. The kabbalah almanas l'siyai the kedushi etluim ba'av. Afagav the lekah shows even though there's no time left. Kivan number tov sheish mitzasiyai. That would be a little complicated if she committed adultery in the middle, because it's like a yid l'mafreya, according to the Tanakhama. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says, there's got to be a shavaputa left of work that she owes him in that 6 year period. It's got to be something left. So, in other words, the Tanakhama says nothing has to be left, because the father, when he sold her initially, it was like he's selling her with the condition that he might marry her. This money might be for marriage also. Therefore, even if there's no money left now, it's like it was a marriage from the time that he bought her. Rashi says, no, he's buying her right now, and therefore it's got to be something left. Marshal, it's comparable to what? Marry me now, I want it to be chal later on. I want it after 30 days, marry me, but it's a marriage from right now. This is what you asked Moshe. A man says on January 1st, tells a woman, marry me as of February 1st. Right? But on February 1st, I want it to be married, but I want it to be chal now on January 1st. Now, if somebody came along on January 15th, Martin Luther King Day, came along and married her on January 15th, it's not chal because it wouldn't work. Why? Because on February 1st, her marriage is chal and mafreya back on January 1st. Again, it's gashli me'achshav lach, marry me from today. After 30 days, we'll move in together, but it's married now. Now, who is it? Mashal Laman. When you say you give this example, who are you talking about? The Tanakhama or Rabbi Yosef Yehuda? Elam and Mashal Rabbi Yosef Yehuda. He said no. He said it's a marriage only at the end of the 6 years. If there's some money left that she owes him, at that point it's a קידושין. Not It's according to the Rabbanan who said that when he bought her in servitude initially, that was also the marriage money, and therefore even if there's no money left on, the marriage was from the beginning. That's what the Rabbanan said, and therefore that works me'achshav. Says more pshita. That's obvious according to Rabbanan. What else could it be? Pshita the motzeh. Obviously, if he marries her from right now, right, schal right now, meaning me'achshav, later on we'll actually consummate the marriage, but it's chal right now. Then obviously, if somebody married her in between on January 15th, it wouldn't mean anything. Mount is saying he didn't say me'achshav. In other words, in the case where the Yid, he didn't say marry me from right now. He said marry me with you. I'm buying her in servitude, and he might perform Yid later on. He didn't say me'achshav. Rashi says Mount is saying he didn't say the father of me'achshav. And maybe you could say, even if you didn't say Yachshav, it should also work. In other words, if a man says today on January 1st, he says, listen, on January 31st, I want it to be marriage. He didn't say Yachshav, he didn't say right now. Maybe then, if somebody marries on January 15th, it still doesn't work because it's understood Yachshav. No, the answer is only Yachshav. From the Tanakama, you say that's Yud. Yud is a different because the money for the servitude is at the same is really the money for the marriage too. So it's understood that it's from right now, from the time that she started working for him, time that she became a slave girl. But you want to darshan out a me'achshav. So you might think there he didn't say me'achshav. It should work even if you didn't say me'achshav. Mashmon, you have to say me'achshav. Tainich, another brisa. Hamoch spito. If a man sold his daughter, after he sold her, listen, as a man sold his daughter to Yankel, then he went to Kitchalacher. Then he went and he married her off to somebody else. He sold her, and then he married somebody else. Sichik ba'adam. He's just playing with the Adam. She is married. The marriage works. L'sheni, to the second guy. Why is the word according to Rav Yosef? Because Rav Yosef said that when the Adam marries her, that's only when he actually marries her. When he actually marries her, if there's some money left there, it's not from right now. So therefore, if the father married her off to somebody else in between, true, she's a slave girl and she owes the other guy 6 years or until Yovel or until Simanim. But she's married to the other guy, married to the second guy. Again, he sold her to Yankel, to number one, and then he married her off to number two. He's just playing with the other. And she's married to second Divra Besabuda. No. Chum say no. No, the Yid could work. Why could the Yid work according to Chum? Because the Chum say the money that you gave initially for servitude was also for קידושין. So if the man decides later on that if the other decides to marry her, she was married from the beginning. So the קידושין to the second guy wouldn't work. Marshall, what's an example? Marry me after 30 days, not today. Marry me after 30 days. And somebody else married her in between. She's married to the second guy. Who is it for? Can you say it's emotional? The Rabbanan say that if he wants to make Yid, it's a Yid. Meaning, he sold her to number one, and then he married her off to number two, so she's married to number two. So the Rabbanan said no. If the first guy wants to make Yid, it's Yid. No, the Rabbanan said she's not married to number two. So Mashal Yosef said, if you sold her to number one and then you married off to number two, she's married to number two. Just like if a man said, marry me after 30 days and somebody else married her in between. So somebody else in between married her first. The second guy was only going to be after 30 days. Shita, isn't that obvious? That's what Rabbi Yosef says. Now the same. He didn't say lachash shloshim yom in the case of what? Of the year. He just said, I'm buying you in servitude, and if he decides to marry her later on, okay, it's here from that point on. Says Rashi, he didn't say that. But if he said lachash shloshim yom, maybe even though he didn't say me'achshav, it's like he said me'achshav. Maybe chal. In other words, Rav Yosef Yehuda, what is he talking about? A case of Yid. What's the case of Yid? The guy bought, they were in servitude from the father, and Rav Yosef says, well, if at the time, if later on he wants to have Yid with her, if there's money left, it's good enough. But if somebody married her in between, he would be married to the second guy. That's what we said. If the father, what Rav Yosef said, if he sold her to number one and then he followed by marrying her to number two before number one did Yid, she's married to number two. He can't do Yid anymore because Yid was only at that point in time with whatever is left. So isn't it obvious? It's like the case of marry me after 30 days and somebody else married her after 15 days, so she's married to the second guy. Isn't it obvious? I might say, he didn't say marry me after 30 days in the case of Yid. He just said I'm marrying her. So the same thing over here would be. You didn't say after 30 days, but if you say marry me after 30 days, even though you didn't say me'achshav, maybe it's chal right now. Kamashma, no, that it's exactly the same. That the case of Yid and the case of lachash shloshim is one of the same. So if you say marry me later on and somebody else marries her in between, she's being married to the second guy. Tanya Yidach, another price. Man sells her. I'm selling you for servitude, but I don't want you marrying her. I'm selling her off in the קידושין. What he said, the Torah says, if you buy the Omavriya, you or your son can perform Yid. In fact, Pshat is, we said according to the Brisa, that Asher Imra Al Beinei Nef, it's a Malamed Shetzarach Liyai, right? According to Yosef, it's a proper thing to do. Let's say he says, though, I'll sell her to you on the condition that you don't have yid. I don't want you marrying her. I'll marry her off later on, right? Maybe I'll do that, right? As we said before, you could have maybe acher. You could have ishus acher shiftless, right? That's what we said. Right? Even Rav Kiva says you could do that, right? Okay. Rav Shimon says no. Right? You can't have shiftless, but you could have ishus acher shiftless. Okay. So he says if a man sells his daughter on the condition that you can't have yid, does it work or not? So at that time, this guy time, Rav Meir says that's a good condition. That's okay. You can't marry her now. That's the condition. The condition was you can't have yid. If he wants to marry, make sure he's the mashikas of Torah. The Torah says if you sell your daughter, the adon is entitled to marry her or marry her off to his adult son, as we know now, right? Adult son. You can't make a t'nai against the Torah. You can't make a condition. Torah said these are the conditions of an amavriya. You can't change those conditions. Rav Meir says you could. Well, Rav Meir, to know kind, we'd really say according to Rav Meir, you can change the conditions, and his condition is fulfilled, right? The condition is fulfilled. But Tanya, we learn the condition is established. It's done. The guy tells I'll marry you on the condition. I'll marry on the condition that I'm not going to feed you, I'm not going to clothe you, and we're not going to have relations. Hareza Mukudeshes, she's Kudesh, but to know about the Rav Meir says that doesn't mean you can't make a condition against the Torah. Rav Yehuda says, well, if it's a money matter, you could. Rav Yehuda, the Davar Shemama to know kind, she can agree. She says, I don't want your clothes, I don't want your money, I make more money than you anyway. You're in Kollel, I'm working. I make more money than you anyway. So for that, you make a condition. You can't make a condition against having bia though. That's considered tzara guf. Yeah, that's money. You can be mochel. You can't be mochel bia having relations in a normal husband and wife relationship. But what do you see? Rav Meir holds you can't make any condition. Even money you can make a condition. Rav Meir says if you say marry me on the condition I'm not going to feed you, I'm not going to clothe you, I'm not going to be with you, it's a marriage and your condition is meaningless. You can't make a condition against what the Torah defined what marriage is. These are the rules of marriage. Feed her, clothe her, live with her. You can't change those conditions. So how can Rav Meir say over here, I'm selling you my daughter on the condition you can't have yid? It's a good condition. How does that work? I'm shining off the pasuk says la'ama. If you want to, you could sell it just for slavery and not for marriage. You could do that. So that's a special pasuk la'ama. Special pasuk b'bad. The Rabbanim say you can't make such a condition. If you sell off your daughter in slavery, the husband's entitled to marry her, or her son can marry her, despite your condition. Your condition means nothing. So what do they do with la'ama? Just say v'chiyim karshishis bito. You sell her. You sell her means you sell her in servitude. What is la'ama? Can you sell her off to a mamzer? Mamzer's not supposed to marry her, right? Can you sell her? Mamzer says you could. She's in servitude. Even to an amma, she's sold in slavery, even to a puzzle. Below dinner, you might say, wouldn't I know that anyway? If he can marry her off to a psul. Now, can you marry her off to a mamzer? Not supposed to, but the קידושין works. We don't know like a Bekiva, the קידושין is not chal by chayv alav. It's only chayv alav, and the קידושין works. Many mamzerim get married to. Right? So he says, if you can marry off to psulim lein pered, I'm certain he can sell. He can marry off to a puzzle. He can certainly be able to sell it to a puzzle. What's the big deal if she works for him? Because he can't perform yid technically, right? If he's a mamzer, but isn't it logical if he can marry off the psul? Certainly he can sell her. So no malakash psulim she can't know the mekadosh speedok shinara. Different mekadosh because he has more power over her because he can marry off until the age of 12 and a half, even when she's bat mitzvah, when she's a nara. Somebody can't sell it to a psul. You can marry off your daughter until the age of 12 and a half. You can only sell her until the age of 12. She goes out when she's 12. She goes out of freedom. So therefore, marriage is stronger than selling. So therefore, I might say, fine, maybe you can marry her, but maybe you can't sell her because selling is weaker. So you can only sell it until the age of 12. Therefore, I need the pasuk la'ama. That's what the Rabbanan say. Lama teaches me you can even sell her to a mamzer who's not supposed to marry her. Not supposed to say he could marry her, but he's not supposed to. So you can even say Rabbi Lezer Amar, to tell me that you could sell it to a psul, to a mamzer, The pasuk says Imra'a be'einei Adonai, right? And how does he translate the word Imra'a be'einei? Pshat is if the master doesn't like her, actually he doesn't want to marry her, right? So it says let her redeem herself and don't sell. You can't sell her to somebody else. He translates Imra'a be'einei if she's bad in his eyes because he can't marry her because he's a mamzer. Imra'a be'einei sharabin, it's a bad marriage. You can't marry her. So you already know from those words Imra'a be'einei that what? That you can marry a puzzle, that he can sell her off to a puzzle. That's obvious because it's Imra'a be'einei now. What if she's bad in the eyes of her adam? What does it mean bad? Mean that he can't marry? It's a bad nasuin because he's a mamzer. So I already know you're talking about where a mamzer bought her. So I already know that you can sell her to a puzzle, you can sell her to a mamzer. You can even marry, you can even sell her to your relatives, like your son. You have a young girl who's 8 years old, and your son has got a plantation. He got it from his father-in-law, father-in-law plantation, and now he needs some help. So you want to sell your own daughter to her brother, to a brother. Can you do that? Well, he can't perform yid. He can't marry his sister, right? He can't sleep with a sister. So you know what? Lama teaches me you can even sell her, even though the brother can obviously not perform yid on her, you could still sell her. That's what Lama teaches me according to Blazer. Dinu. You might say, if you could sell her to a puzzle, then obviously you can marry her to a pro. You could sell her to a mamzer, you can't sell her to her own brother. Her own brother might give her a nice little dessert for lunch there, whatever. It might be nice to her. So the you sell it to a puzzle to a mamzer. He could be miyader. It's against the Torah. It's over and above, but yid would work. Can you sell it to a problem? It's different over. You can't sell it to a brother because the brother can never perform a marriage under any conditions. The קידושין with Michal would be a chorus, would be incest. So I might say that what you can't marry her to her son. That's what Rav Lezer used the drasha for. All right, you could even sell it to Krabim. So we have this machlokas. Can you sell it? Tanakama says you can't sell it to a Krabim. Can't sell that because she can't perform yid. What does La'ama teach me? According to the Rabbanan, that you could sell her to somebody who's a mamzer, right? So again, Rav Meir said, what does La'ama teach me? That what? You could sell her even with the condition that you can't perform yid. That's not even if you can't perform yid. According to Rabbanan who say you can't make such a condition, what does La'ama teach me? Either what, that you can even sell her to a mamzer. You can sell her to a mamzer not supposed to. Rav Lezer says you can even sell it to Krabim. For Rav Meir who learns out from La'ama what? That you can marry her, you could sell her even though you can sell her with the condition of no yid. Right? You could sell with Yisham based on La'ama. So L'Psulin, how does he know that you can marry her off to a mamzer? The way Rav Lezer from Imra'a be'einei Adonai. That's what that pasuk means. If you married her off if you sold her to a mamzer, which is a bad marriage, Imra'a be'einei Adonai, because you can't marry. That's where he learns out Psulim. The Krovim, what about how does he know you can sell it to Krovim? He doesn't hold you can sell it to Krovim. So like Rabbani, I was like Rabbanan, Krovim. Rabbanan say you can't sell off your daughter to a karov, like to your son who has a plantation. Can't sell. Why? Because he can't perform yid. But you could sell it to a mamzer. You could possibly sell it to a mamzer who's not supposed to marry her, but he could marry her. In theory, he could marry her. The marriage would be chal. Okay, and so Rav Meir, Rav Meir will say psulin like the way the Rabbanan learn, right? The way the Rabbanan learn, and or the way Rav Lezer learns rather from Imra'a be'einei Adonai, and they'll say you can't marry her off to Krovim. Whereas Rav Lezer says you could marry off to Krovim based on La'ama. Tanichad, one Bryce says you could sell off to your father. Can you sell it to your father? Now let me ask you something. Can your father marry your daughter? Of course not, right? Of course not. So one Bryce says, well, you could sell to your father. Now, who would that go like? That would go like Rav Lezer, who says you could marry her off to Krovim, even though he cannot be performed. But you can't sell it to your son. You could sell it to your father, not to your son. Well, what does that make sense? No, you can't sell it to any of your relatives. You can't sell it to your father who can't marry your daughter, and you can't sell it to your son who can't marry your daughter. It's a brother. Very good. You can't sell her to your father or to your son. That goes like the Rabbanan say. You cannot sell her to a karov mishpacha who cannot perform yid, right? Because it says in the other, you got to be able to perform yid, so you cannot sell it to a relative. No, come on. The first price that it says you could sell it to your father, but not to your son. What does that go like? Lo Rabbanan, not like the one who say you can't sell it to family at all. Lo Rabbanan says you could sell to family. So who does that price go like? So but it goes like the Rabbanan, who says what? That you cannot sell her to relatives. Motor Rabbanan hechadik side yid. Listen to this. But the Rabbanan Ramoto, there's a side. Listen carefully. When you sell your daughter to your son, right? When you sell your daughter to your son, is there a way for Yid to be performed? Well, he can't marry her. It's his sister. Could he sell her off? Could he marry off to his son? No. What is his son to your daughter? A nephew. He would be marrying his aunt. There's no way to perform Yid over there. Okay. So there, you can't marry her off to your son. And so Rabbanan say you cannot marry off to her Karov, would say you can't marry her off to a son. You can't sell her to a son because a son cannot marry his sister, and his son cannot marry his aunt. However, if you sell your daughter to your father, he's got another plantation. You sell your daughter to your father, well, the father cannot marry her. Why? Because it's his granddaughter, right? But let's say the father has another son. Father's got another son. Can that son perform Yid? Yes. It would be marrying his niece. He's an uncle. Then he's motive. That's the shot in the Bryce. So it says you could sell her to your father, but not to your son. Because your son, there's no way to perform Yid. He can't do it, it's his sister, and his son can't do it, it's his aunt. A man cannot marry his aunt, but he could marry his niece. So if you sell it to your father can't perform Yid, but your father had a son, could perform Yid, so therefore that would work. That's how we come out. Tomorrow's Daf is Daf Chaf, and we'll pick it up. This will take us on Sunday morning. We'll pick it up. I think it's the fourth line right by the parentheses there. Start from there on Sunday, Mitzvah Shem, and Daf Chaf will be on the podcast. Shabbat Shalom l'kulam.
You sell your son, without קידושין.
Right. So that's the machlokas. According to Rabbi Lezer says you could sell your daughter to your son, even though he can't perform Yid. Right? You could do that based on law. You could sell just as a slave. You could sell that even though you can't perform. That's Rabbi Lezer Shita. And the Rabbanan say no, you can't sell your son at all unless Yid could be performed. You don't see it could be performed. And we said you could sell her even to a psul, to a mamzer, because Yid could be performed even though it would be forbidden. It's a law, but it would work.